Okay, thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is a very important topic, preparing for the holidays after a loss. And we're very, very happy to have you with us. I want to mention that we just have one more of these Arise calls this year, and that is going to be on December 1st. And our speaker is Karen Rohrer. And she's going to be talking about planning ahead in order to avoid the post-holiday blues that we all experience, but especially after we've had a loss. I'm Leanne Lorian, and I'm the host of these calls, and I welcome you and also just want to give you a pat on the back for making the time to come and prepare yourself to celebrate the holidays in a maybe different, but potentially a very meaningful way. And I have a wonderful panel, I think, that's here to help you. So grab a pencil and paper and take notes. And this call is also being recorded, so you have the opportunity to listen to it again. While the speakers are speaking, would you keep your mute button on and use your chat button to ask questions? Towards the end of this call, I'll be reading those questions to our panelists and asking them to respond to them. And I might just chip in here and there too as a panelist. So I have a wonderful group of people here today. I'm just going to give you a little bit of heads up on some things that I have learned as my introduction. I do want to say that you have survived a very difficult circumstance in your life. You've gone through a very stressful time. When you lose a spouse, it's the top of the heap as far as stress moments in a lifetime. And profound loneliness. Let's face it, COVID has really made life difficult. So I give you credit for coming to this call tonight to begin to think about how you're going to celebrate the holidays and make it meaningful and perhaps try some new traditions. The holidays are important, of course, but you need to accept the fact that they won't be normal this year or any year probably in the future. And that's not to say that they won't be happy. It's just that they won't be the same. And give yourself permission to let go of some of those expectations and the pressure that comes along with them. As you know better than most people, life is not a Hallmark movie. And I made the analogy, and I thought it was pretty apt, that the holidays are kind of like when a tornado warning sounds, and you are either the kind of person that runs outside to take pictures or the person that runs down to the basement and hides. And the holidays are kind of like that tornado coming. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? So tonight I want to introduce my panelists, and I'm so thankful for them. We've worked hard to come up with some good questions that we feel will be helpful to you. My first, and I'm going to let her introduce herself or tell you more about herself. My first panelist is Krista Mahoney. Go ahead, Krista.
I need to unmute myself. There we go. It's good to be with everybody tonight. My name is Krista. My husband's name was Ryan. We were married for just about 10 years, and this will be my third Christmas since he passed away. He died of cancer after about 1.5 years of treatment. And at the time we had 2 kids, Kieran, our son, who was 8, and Maisie, our daughter, who was 3.5. So now my kids are almost 11 and 5.5. And that first Christmas was was really tough. I think the time between Thanksgiving and New Year's was probably one of the toughest periods for me, for my grief and just for life in general. And I guess one of the things that I've learned is that it does get easier. The second Christmas was definitely easier, and I am looking forward to the holidays this year. It helps to have kids who are just so joyful and so full of life, and that's something that just brings me a lot of joy.
Thank you, Krista. My second panelist is Michelle Ramier. Michelle,
Hi.
do you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. I'm honored that you asked me to join, and I recognize some names and faces in the participants. This also is my third holiday season without my husband. He died in June of 2019. He struggled for about a very intense 4-month period with a lot of sleep issues, which became extreme anxiety and depression. And so he died by suicide. Our kids were 12 and 14 at the time. So they are 14 and 17 now. So I have teenagers. And yeah, I agree with Krista. I feel like this is the first holiday season where I feel like I'm on pretty good footing. The first year was kind of a blur. Then last year was just really odd because COVID. But the first year I did, I think and I'm not kidding, I did the best parenting decision I've ever made is I got a golden retriever puppy. And it is so life-changing. I mean, he has brought so much joy, and he is like, we get outside, we go to the dog parks. My kids are really good kids, but they're teenagers. So they're at times pretty surly, and to see them rolling on the floor, talking baby talk with the dog is just, it's unbelievable. So I'm just so thankful that the dog came into our lives. So he's made all the difference. Hold it for right now.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And my third panelist is Julie Hull. Go ahead, Julie. I'll have you introduce yourself.
Okay. I love what you just said, Michelle. I think joy can come in many forms, and I think a pet is a wonderful addition to your family. I'm happy for you. That's awesome. I'm a widow. I have been on this forum before. I'm happy to see some familiar names as well. So I am a widow. My husband died of a rare form of cancer when my youngest was 11. And so as far as the holidays, this is the 7th one after my husband has died. And I've had a lot of losses since then. So it is a really hard time of the year. There's no doubt about it. But I also know that there is, a really intentional, beautiful way to build your life around your grief. Your grief is not the end of your story. And I hope it's not the defining chapter in any of our stories. It's definitely part of our story. So I can tell you that grief changes over the years and it becomes less intense. But I also think, again, it is, grief is just the cost of loving someone so much. And so we grieve because their life mattered. Our lives matter, our kids' lives matter. And so I just hope that this is just another way that we can honor those people. So thank you for your courage to even come on and be a part of this discussion tonight. I applaud each one of you. I know it's really, really hard.
Yes, thank you, Julie. And I want to add that Julie is a marriage and family therapist as well, and kind of specializes in grief. So, all right, well, let's start with a really good foundational question. What do you think good self-care looks like when you're grieving during the holidays? How do you take care of yourself first?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. This is such a good question. It comes up a lot in my practice with a lot of my clients. We traditionally, as women, we're really, really good at being compassionate for everyone, taking care of everyone else. And unfortunately, that means oftentimes we forget about taking care of ourselves. And, I'm always reminded of that message that the flight attendants do on the airplanes. putting your own mask on before assisting others. So I really feel like self-care is really vital, especially at this time of the year when we're really being stretched. And for us to maybe change the way we look at self-care isn't selfish. It truly is not. And so when I talk about self-care, I talk about things such as give yourself permission to hurt, give yourself permission to cry. If you do have a meltdown out in public, do not judge yourself. Do not evaluate that. You are in a tender spot. It's going to happen. You know, the weird thing I have found with grief is some days I'm doing pretty good after 7 years, and other days it can just come like hurricane force and it can literally just bring me to my knees. And there's really oftentimes not even a trigger. It's again, you know, we are living our lives with part of us are missing as our husbands. That's a huge part of us. It's a very unique loss in just, you know, that piece of it. So again, I would say intentionally protecting our health. And those are like kind of the obvious ones. Sleep if you can and when you can, you know, be really mindful of checking out or numbing out with, you know, alcohol or, you know, over shopping, overspending, trying to overcompensate to fill in that wound. I know I did those things. So really just be aware of your feelings. And the other thing too, that I think is really important is be able to say no, or I don't know, or that doesn't work for me, or can I get back to you? I also think we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to, you know, be happy and we want to please everyone, but our lives have changed and our capacity has changed. So we might not be able to show up to all the holiday events like we have in the past. It's not forever, but it is for a time. And I do think it's really honoring to your loved one and to yourself and even to your kids to kind of know your capacity and say, I'll get back to you on that. I can't answer that right now. I'm not sure. And then the other piece of that is if you do commit to going to an event and at the last minute you really can't, please give yourself permission to text that person or call that person and say, really wanted to be there, really can't do it. I'll try again some other time. And then do not judge yourself. I think that's another really, you know, we're using all of our emotional energy to grieve. And so we are exhausted. So that's kind of the highlights of the ones that I think are really helpful.
Excellent.
I would certainly agree with Julie that saying no is one of the gifts that we can really give to ourselves. Say no when it doesn't feel life-giving or like you don't have the capacity for it. And also don't say no to everything, you know, because you still want to be connected to those relationships that do feel life-giving and are going to be an encouragement to you. And keep you from feeling isolated during this time. When I think about self-care, one of the things that really comes to mind for me is being present in the moment. And one of the best ways for me to do that is to find different ways to engage my body or to engage my senses. So I like even tonight, I have my cup of tea. And during the cold winter months, I drink tea all the time. It just feels so good. And I have my cozy blanket actually too. So I just love to have some bodily, you know, physical comforts like that. And also moving my body feels really good. During, I guess, I don't know if we'll have, you know, snow this Christmas. I certainly hope so, but skiing and ice skating are ways that I have found for myself as well as for my family to get outside and get moving. I promise it really doesn't feel quite as cold as it is if you're actually moving your body outside, but just getting some vitamin D. I feel like that's something that I lean into pretty heavily as the days get shorter. And one thing that I do is my family really appreciates celebrating Advent as we lead up to Christmas. And I just have an daily Advent devotional that I look forward to doing, usually in the morning. And I like to choose something that has maybe an art component, whether that's photography or painting or music that goes along with it, just to remind myself and expose myself to some beauty I think in the early days of grieving, I needed kind of something to like pull myself out of some, some holes. And I think art and beauty, for me, that was something that I found to be really encouraging.
I agree. I found that music was a huge help to me. I turned my music up really loud. I might do the Messiah, or I might play even just hymns, Christmas hymns, and just enjoy the music. That is just soothes me. So it's a way of taking care of yourself. One thing I was going to mention is, as hard as it is, I find that sugar makes me more depressed. And, the holidays, it's just sugar, sugar, sugar all the time. And I have to be aware of that because it's a downer for me. And it's something that, if you know that of yourself, that some type of food or some type of activity really gets you in a bad place. You just have to be aware of that and avoid it.
And I'll just add quickly, just I go by the mellow and manageable philosophy. Just when it comes to kind of all the time, but especially during, this time of the year, just really know my boundaries and make other people aware of my boundaries. And a lot of times things sound like a really good idea when they're 3 weeks away, but I really have to think hard before I commit to something, because I don't want to get just overwhelmed. So mellow and manageable, and also just letting go of like a standard of perfection, just like redefining. There's an author that writes about loss and grief, Kayla Stockling, and she talks about rebuilding beautiful. So not only did we lose we have lost our husbands or our wives, but we also lost the future that we thought we were going to have. So that's a secondary loss, and it's huge. So we just have to, we're rebuilding beautiful for our families.
I love that, rebuilding beautiful. Well, I want to ask this question next. How have you communicated with family and friends who have expectations on you and your children? How have they helped, and how have they not been helpful in the way you approach the holidays? So how does your family relate with the family and friends that you maybe traditionally did things with when your husband was living? Anyone?
I guess this hasn't really been an issue for me. Just one thing that's been really helpful as far as communication. And this is more like in the early days after my husband died, but still on pivotal days, people will send me just a heart emoji or a message saying, "I'm thinking of you, please, no need to respond." That was huge, just because, especially in the early days, it was like there was a lot of support, which is wonderful, but it was like a fire hose of social obligations kind of to respond to everybody. And it's such a small thing, but it was so big, just to get a heart, and I didn't have to respond. Just knowing somebody was thinking of us went a long way.
Someone texted in the chat that they have family and friends who say to them, "You should be over it by now. Get on with your life. That's what your husband would want." How do you respond to that? Anyone?
I guess I can respond. The goal is not to get over it. the goal is not closure in grief. The goal is to build your life around it again. And it's sort of like what Michelle said, building beautiful. It is actually moving from a place of coping eventually to a place of thriving. And it really can be done. It does take time. It's hard, but it's also beautiful at the same time. So for those people, you know, a lot of it depends on what their story is with grief. How was it modeled for them? Were they able to grieve? Were they able to show their feelings? So everyone's going to respond differently. But, you know, when people said to me, you know, I'm getting a little tired about you talking about, you know, your husband dying or being dead. And I wanted to say, well, I'm a little tired about the fact that he is dead, you know, but I can't do anything about that. So you know what? I'm going to find the people that I can still talk to him about that don't like go like this when I come near them. And I'm going to seek them out. So again, for everyone that really is maybe judging themselves, like it's been a year and I'm not over it. You don't get over it. You don't get over loving someone. You don't get over losing them. So, you know, I hope we have more grief fluency to come and more people being able to actually say it's not something to get over. It really isn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I say it's an amputation. So do you get over an amputation? No, you have to learn to function without the missing limb.
Mhm.
Amen. Mhm.
Can I add something? I just have learned to say sometimes to myself, but I am not governed by your schedule.
Good, really good.
Yep, good. Thanks, Corinne.
Keep up with that, Corinne. That's a good attitude to have.
Mhm.
Because, you know, I really believe they all mean well. I do. I think most people mean really well, but like I said, they don't know what to say. And maybe that helps them be more comfortable. If you could just get over it, we could go back to being normal. Well, it's a new normal, right?
Mhm.
That's good.
Mhm.
Okay, now I want to kind of broach the topic of your children and their grieving as the holidays approach. Have you decided to go ahead and include them in how you plan to celebrate the holidays and how you plan to remember their dad? Or is it something that you kind of say, well, this is what we're going to do, and you know, and encourage them to join in? Which approach have you taken? What seems to work and what doesn't seem to work? Go ahead, any of you.
I can start. So again, I have teenagers, and it hasn't been like a sit down meeting, because I don't really think that would go over very well. But so it's been a lot of just little chats here and there, just to kind of get a pulse of where they are, what they're feeling like. And so then, you know, their opinions come through that way. And so last year, for example, I didn't really even want to get a tree, because it just didn't feel, this is for everybody, whether you had a loss or not. It was COVID, and it was just so weird. And I just wanted to decorate one of our plants. I still wanted to do some lights and things, but my teenage son, who was 16 at the time, really pushed back. He really, really wanted the tree. So I got a tree. And then this year, you know, I just kind of kept, you know, asking them over the last few weeks, like, what should we do this year? And, you know, and I threw out some ideas. And we're going to stay here for Christmas. And then the day after, we're renting an RV and we're driving down to Louisiana, where I have family. And we're renting an RV so we can bring the dog. But, and that was, you know, they really, really wanted to do that. And also, you know, my son is a junior, so I feel like I'm kind of running out of time to make these memories. So it's going to be expensive, but I'm doing it. And, you know, that idea kind of came from just one of those little sprinkled conversations. So I don't know what it's like, Krista, with younger kids. But yeah, with teenagers, I think family meetings would be just kind of scoffed at. So
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Michelle. That's more my style too. You know, not a family meeting. But we, you know, there's just a lot of back and forth between my kids and I, and just kind of on an ongoing daily basis about what they want. And they're young enough at, at 5 and 10 that they're just pretty enthusiastic about all things Thanksgiving and Advent and Christmas. So they want to do all the things, and that works for us, at this point in our lives. So one of the things that I have, kind of a practice that we do, that I have been a little bit intentional about, we don't have any specific ways of honoring Ryan at any holiday. We do try to, have some kind of conversation about him. But as we're leading up to a holiday or maybe one of the kids' birthdays, I will get onto Google Photos, and with the kids around, we'll go back and we'll look at previous years of Christmases or previous birthdays. And that's just kind of an open opportunity to, see what it was like when Daddy was here. And we were celebrating that event. And I like it because it's, I'm not pressuring them. I'm not asking them questions, or they can kind of just notice what was happening. And it just gives them some freedom to talk about memories, or to talk about Daddy, or to not, if that's not what they're feeling at that time. So that is a practice I think that's been really, really helpful and really valuable for us. And as Kieran gets older, he definitely shares more and more, and is at least more processing his grief in a more verbal way.
Have you had counseling with the kids? Have they talked to a counselor and worked through some things as young as they are?
Yeah, Kieran did see a counselor for a little while. I would say probably maybe just, I think, 4 months or so. And then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And I think even in that short time, it did kind of get the ball rolling a little bit, kind of to have some practice in talking with someone else besides me about memories of Daddy, or about, times when he misses him. But I really did kind of take my cues from Kieran. I wasn't going to, make him keep seeing a counselor that he wasn't really wanting to see. But it's definitely something that that we could return to, and that I would explore again if it feels like it would be beneficial.
Mhm.
And
I have,
my kids went to therapy too for a while. And they also, for people who have kids in the Twin Cities, there's a grief camp for kids called Camp Aaron that my kids went to. That was really great.
say that
So,
again, the name of it?
Camp Aaron, ERIN. It's, I think it's put on a couple times a year, and it's just a weekend. And it was really, really great. So, yeah, but again, they don't want to go now, and it wouldn't be effective if I made them go. So they'll come back to it, I'm sure, at some point.
And I think too, just to add to what both of you ladies are saying, is you're the expert on your kids. So you really know how, what to push and what not to push on. And grief is so individual. And so I love the fact that you both are attuning to your kids and saying, let's try this. Okay, it's no longer working for you, then it's okay, and try something else. And my kids went to Camp Aaron too. It's excellent.
That's a great resource. I didn't know about that. Yeah.
I would add one thing to that. I think I got some messages while Ryan was on hospice, and maybe afterwards, that, oh, if you're parenting them well and you're listening and you're attuning to your kids, they won't need counseling. And that was not the right message to send to me, because I did kind of have a barrier to cross over, that I felt some shame that, I felt like my son needed someone besides me to talk to. And that was so unnecessary to feel. So I would, just encourage others to have freedom, in that it's not a failure that a child would, need someone else to process things, or someone with some professional training. I don't have professional training in this, but so I was just glad to be able to get over that hurdle, and I don't feel shame over that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really good feedback too. And so I'd like to address the people on the call with adult children that are also grieving the loss of their father, right? And right, Lorian. So it's hard to know, because as a mom, I can get so consumed with my own grief that I really forget about the grief of my children they're having, and it's separate. Some days I do really well. Some days I do really badly. And, so it's just one of those things. But also, adult children have their own way of looking at it, and that's their relationship to their parent. And it's different than the relationship you had with your husband. And it's all pain. None of it is, it's just all unique pain. So I want to honor those people on the call that have adult children too.
I was going to mention that because I'm the one that, lost my husband with adult children, and they miss their dad tremendously. And he was the centerpiece of Christmas for them. Their most cherished memories of Christmas have to do with their dad going out chopping down the Christmas tree. And my husband always read the best Christmas pageant ever to us all as a family. And his favorite movie was It's a Wonderful Life. And so many things are connected. The food we eat, his favorite things. And he always made the appetizers, and just I could go on and on and on. Well, I made the mistake of really thinking more about myself than I did about my kids, although it was very hard to get them to say, this is what would feel right to us. All of us were so kind of at a loss to know what to do, because everything seemed to be attached to Dave somehow. And we're coming up on 5 years, and we've tried all kinds of things, and I can't say that we've really come up with what is right. So, we've tried a lot of, we've done charity things and all kinds of different things that you can do with adult children. But we still all feel that tremendous missing piece. And but we're muddling along is all I can say. And it is more complex because they are adults, they live their own life, and yet we're also intertwined around this person who made Christmas especially such a big part of all of our lives. So
Leanne, I could maybe speak to that just a little bit from the perspective of.
Oh yeah, because you lost your dad. Yeah.
So when I was about 24, it was a month and a half before Ryan and I got married. My dad died suddenly. So my mom, became a widow at that point, and my life was just kind of really entering this new and kind of exciting phase. And then a year later, I had my son Kieran. And so there was another, exciting change. So we were, just really in different places, but she was so gracious to me in, even caring for me as a new wife and caring about me, as an adult child who was grieving. But one thing I remember is that I honestly, I wouldn't think about my dad all that much. I wasn't, daily missing him because I hadn't been in the routine of being with him. But whenever I would go home, that is when, just tears every single time, because that's where my dad should have been. And so holidays, anytime that I went back to my parents' home, that's just when it was most acute. So it would be, I wouldn't think about, or I wouldn't be processing my grief, and then boom, I would go home and it was a lot of grief. And whereas my mom was just, she was very much processing things gradually. And so I think it really does require so much grace for each other, because, especially in the early days, like, you're just trying to survive and everybody's just trying to do their best. And there often aren't really, good answers.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think what Julie said is you don't, you plan to incorporate the grief in the life that you live. You don't try to avoid it. And that is so true. You can't avoid it. You can't work around it. It's got to be part of what you do. And it's part of everything that you do. So
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions that I wanted to address. What has been comforting to you? And what kinds of surprises of joy have you experienced in the holidays? Go ahead, any of the panelists. First Christmas it's going to be tough, and you need to give yourself grace, but you will make it through. And I would encourage you to talk with your adult children and say, how can we honor Dad? What would you like to do? And some of my panelists, I think, have some wonderful ideas of some actual activities that you can do. So I'm going to ask if, I know, Michelle, you shared an idea with me about the letters.
Mhm.
Would you like to share that idea with the group?
Sure. So we continued to hang my husband, his name was John, by the way, John's stocking. And then we take, on Christmas Eve, we take about 20 minutes and we turn the lights down and light a candle and just take some time, and we each write a note to their dad. And, it can be anything. It can be, I'm very angry, or it can be, I really miss you, or, I'm doing really, whatever it happened, whatever is on your mind at that moment. And then we fold them all up, and then we put our name on it with the date, because it's only for, my letters to John are only for me. And then each of the kids, their letters to their dad are only for them. And then, so now last year we pulled the letters out again, and then they got to read them themselves, and then they wrote another one. So presumably in years down the road, the stocking will be really full. And I chose last year not to read the 2019 letter. So I don't know what I'll feel like next month if I'll read the last 2 years. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I can see maybe over time where, how I'm feeling, if I'm, feeling angry one year, or just really sad and missing him, other times. So,
Yeah, I really like that idea. Krista, do you have any new traditions that you've tried?
Yeah, I guess one new tradition that we have is tied to kind of a point of grief, and then a gift. I was, that first year, I was just really dreading getting a Christmas tree. Ryan, I mean, we'd always had a great time as a family going out to get a tree. And then, of course, Ryan was the one who would put the tree in the tree stand. And then we would, have fun decorating it together. And I just didn't know how to get that tree in the tree stand. And it just felt overwhelming. It felt like the biggest problem in the world. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I honestly don't remember if I asked or if our friend offered, but our dear friend Rick, who is kind of like a surrogate grandfather to my kids. It was just a really good friend of Ryan's. He came with us to the park to get a Christmas tree, and he just totally took charge of it. And you know, they put the tree on our van, got it home, and it was like up, you know, just before I knew it. And then, you know, we had a hot chocolate and we just had a really sweet time. And so I asked him again last year, you know, hey, could you do this again? And we're going to do it again this year. So I think it's a new tradition that we have, is that Rick comes and helps us with our Christmas tree. And that's just been a neat way. You know, of course, it's important for us to do things, just the three of us sometimes, and that can be the toughest. But it's also a gift to be able to include someone else in our traditions, and I think Rick really enjoys it as well. So
Yeah, that's really sweet. Any other ideas of things you've tried or thought about trying?
another thing that I would add about putting up the Christmas tree, we still put up a lot of Ryan's childhood ornaments, and it's I credit his mom with just really kind of chronicling his life in a really neat way, with the ornaments that she gave him. And so it's been Kieran especially just really enjoys looking at his ornaments, and oh yeah, I remember Daddy was he delivered newspapers, and like, oh, you know, Daddy loved to surf. And so that's been just a fun way to kind of remember who he was and what a rich and wonderful life he had. And then even as my kids put up their ornaments, there's often a connection with something that they love to do with Daddy.
Yeah, that's one of the ideas that I've talked about in a couple of other situations, an actual memory tree that is like maybe a smaller tree that you put up, and the ornaments all have to do with the person that you've lost. You know, the person was a fisherman or a hunter, or, you know, like you have a surfer, or, you know, just doing that as a way of remembering all the aspects of that person's life. We have that. We have Dave was a terrible ham. I mean, ham joke teller, goofball. So my brother found an ornament that actually looks like a little ham. And just, you know, the movie It's a Wonderful Life. So there's an ornament that has that movie title on it and things like that. So that's kind of our tradition, and, you know, several other things that were special about him that we put on the tree. And that's a fun, that's more cheery kind of memory thing to do.
So I have one to share. When my kids got older, we had a gift every year that would remain unwrapped. And it was usually the one that I would spend the most time wrapping and really be intentional about the bows and the wrapping paper. And it remained unwrapped. And what we did was, it just represented there's many beautiful things in our future we haven't unwrapped yet. You know, this isn't the end at all. And so what we do is every year I rewrap it, and then we hand it to each other. And you don't have to say anything, but if you want to, you can say something that you thought of last year. Did it happen in the, you know, future last year? Or is it something that you want for the future ahead? So it's a really, it's no pressure. Like some of my older ones didn't want to do it, and some of the younger ones did, but it's just something to kind of be a little mindful of. It's not the end. And you know what? Daddy loves us and he's here, and there's a lot of good things to unwrap still.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really sweet. Well, my daughter came up with a great idea the first year after Dave passed away. It was her idea to make cancer chemotherapy care bags, because my husband had just one chemotherapy before he died of a heart attack. But we put together, I think we had something like 80 of these bags, and people, we just told people we were doing this and they gave us money. And so we went out and bought, like soft socks and lotion and chapstick and things that people who are going through chemotherapy find comforting. And then we put a little card in each one that just said, we're doing this in memory of Dave Lorian, and put his favorite Bible verse on it, and gave those away at the chemotherapy center where he had his last chemotherapy. So it was kind of that was her idea, and we did it together, and that felt really good. So if that's a possibility for you to do something like that in memory of your loved one, then I think that, at least for us, that was a very healing thing to do.
We have also made donations to NAMI since my husband died as a result of a mental illness. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. So that's, something that you can do. And then a couple things I read about that I really liked was this whole reimagining gift giving, and again, writing something down, but writing down the gifts that our loved ones left us with, the lasting gifts, like their sense of humor, the travel memories, maybe the financial security. I mean, those are all gifts that, they're not wrapped, but they are gifts that we continue to benefit from. And then I liked the, buy a present that your husband would have liked and wrap it and then donate it. So you're still kind of including him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read about a family that had a tradition that before the dad passed away, that he didn't want presents. So instead of getting presents from his family, he would say, I'm going to buy uniforms for a Little League baseball team. And he'd ask the family, instead of giving him a gift, to give money towards his little project. And it was always a real confined kind of project, not just giving a donation, but an actual thing that he was going to do, or buy baseball bats or hockey equipment for a little hockey team or something like that. And then after he passed away, the family continued that tradition. And they called it the White Envelope Project. And there would be a white envelope on the tree, and they would just put the money in there for that project. And they continued to do that every year.
Mm-hmm.
I love those that specifically connect it back to the person. I just think that's just so honoring to that life. Yeah, very cool.
The second year after Ryan died, we did something that felt really meaningful for me, not necessarily for the kids, but Ryan had stayed for quite a while at the Gift of Life Transplant House in Rochester when he was receiving treatment at Mayo. And it was just such a neat place. Ryan loved it there. And there were a number of friends and guys from church who stayed there with him during his treatment. And so I asked kind of that group and people who had been close with us during that time if they would, want to donate some goods that I could bring down. And it was so great just to have other people participating in it with me. So I brought a van full of goods down to the transplant house. And for me, it was so healing, because it was the first time that I made that trip down to Rochester since Ryan had died. And, when he was sick, I don't know how many times I made that drive, but it was a good way to do it, to go down with a purpose, and to go down with bringing something that was going to be a gift and a blessing to someone else.
isn't it so true that when you turn out away from your own grief and kind of, not that you're not acknowledging your grief, but that you help someone else, it just, it just feels right. And it does help bring healing. And I think it's great to include the kids in that too, because then they see that, in fact, good comes out of this sadness.
I
Well,
think that's true too. It really represents a lot of hope to our kids. You know, what we're modeling on our very worst days and our very best days is that, you know, there is a purpose and there's meaning and, you know, we can help other people. I love that because I think when we take the focus off ourselves, it doesn't take away our pain, but it also lets us breathe life into someone else and give hope to someone else. And Leanne has heard me say this in various talks before, but one thing that I've found helpful to remember is grief in isolation doubles. Grief that is brought to community is cut in half. So as hard as it is to, you know, put yourself out there, it really is, it's, you know, we in community can heal at a deeper level and we all need to be connected.
And this year, hopefully, things will be better with COVID. And although I see the numbers in Minnesota are not that great, we do have people on this call from all over the country. Hopefully, families will be able to gather in a more normal way this time, and that will be a help. So, again, I want to invite you back on the 1st to hear Karen talk about making a plan to avoid the post-holiday letdown that we often experience. And I want to thank you all, and especially my panelists, Krista, Julie, and Michelle, for the wonderful contributions and thoughtful responses that you gave tonight. And I want to just say to all of you who attended tonight, God bless you. And just praying and hoping that this holiday season will be even more beautiful than you thought was possible. So have a happy holiday season and good night to all.
Be with everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night.